Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. You can see everyone trickling in now. We had a lot of folks register for this one, so excited to chat. And as always, I just want to say thank you. I know there's a million different things out there that are vying for your attention. So we don't take it lightly that you decided to spend the next hour or so with us. Got a great panel lined up today. And before I get to introducing the panelists, super quick housekeeping. So today, what we're going to be talking about, we're talking about hiring at unicorn companies, super fast growing companies. If you're unfamiliar with the term unicorn, it's a company with $1 billion valuation. So typically that means they're growing absurdly fast. So that's what we're going to be talking about. We've got some discussion points, but I always like it when you, the community, is in the driver's seat. So there is a Q&A function at the bottom. If you have any questions that kind of pertain to this topic, do get them in. I'll be moderating the Q&A, and we're going to try and get through as many as possible. We've got the right people to answer these questions. And then second, it's always more fun when we know who we're hanging out with. So there is a chat feature as well. Go ahead, introduce your name, title, company, say what's up. It's always fun to know who we're rocking with. And you can even throw your LinkedIn on there, get everyone connecting. And then last but not least, these are all recorded. So if you have to jump off, you got to do a one-on-one with your manager. If you are a manager, you have to do a one-on-one. You got to close a deal. It's the end of the month. Any of that stuff. These are all recorded, so we'll have this in your inbox within about 24 hours. So don't stress. But that's the boring stuff out of the way. Now I get to introduce my panel. I am joined by Ryan, Jason, and Taylor, and I'll get each one of you to go into your background quickly. And Taylor, let's start with you. We were actually on one of these earlier this week, and I asked the same question. So now you're going to know my trick that I ask the same question every time. But it is, what is your superhero origin story? Is how I usually put it. How did you get to become a business development leader at a company that everyone knows, Salesforce?
Yeah, thank you so much, Scott. So yeah, my name is Taylor. I'm a business development manager at Salesforce, leading our team based out of Canada. So my story is I started in startups, started as an SDR and worked my way up through SDR, BDR, account exec, did some enterprise sales for a while. At the same time, I was doing my MBA, kind of when I was finishing my account executive roles, and decided to jump into management. So I've been in the tech space for about 6 or 7 years now, have 3 years of management experience. But on the side, I also am a professor at a college here in Toronto, and also own my own business doing sales consulting called Black Arrow. So that's, I think, partly what landed me the job at Salesforce, is kind of the robust amount of experience within tech and startups, and also kind of that additional experience outside of, I'll call it my 9 to 5. So that's a little bit about me.
Very cool. You keep yourself very, very busy. I have a quick follow-up question. So you did your MBA while you're working. That kudos, that's insane. As someone thinking, I think many people are like, hey, should I do an MBA? Is it worth it? What did you gain from your MBA, and would you recommend it?
Yeah, great question. And I get this question all the time. So for me, I have an undergrad in science. So an MBA for me was really important just to round out my business skills. So definitely, if you don't have a business degree, I think that helps give you the business acumen that you need to speak to C-level executives, particularly in sales, which is really important. But for me, it was also about the, I guess I'll call it critical thinking and strategic skills that you learn. So more of the soft skills, working with other people. I also did my MBA globally. So I was in a class of individuals across 47 countries. So for me, that was an insane and really cool experience to learn how they do business over in, China versus France versus Canada. I know Jason's working through that right now with his team and hiring. So For me, it was definitely worth it to learn about not only like local or Canadian laws and ways of doing business, but also globally, and then kind of be able to roll that into my role each and every day. So
very cool. All right, sold. I think you sold a few people on the MBA. It's I like it. Jason, moving on to you. Jason Prindle is currently the Director of Inside Sales and Global Sales Development at Big ID, going into lots of new markets, doing a lot of cool things. What's the superhero origin story of Jason, though? How'd you get to where you're at today?
Oh man, I like to say, I tell people I've been selling since I was 9 years old and trying to sling Kool-Aid to the construction workers in my neighborhood. But I've been in inside sales and sales pretty much my entire career. I actually started in tech support, and I realized that kind of hiding behind a terminal wasn't for me. I had to be out there in front of people. So moved into sales, and I've been just kind of progressing ever since, right? From a seller to running teams within larger organizations to then recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, actually building my own sales development team and kind of using all the experiences I've had and all the good and the bad that I've experienced from other managers and other companies to build a sales development team how I see fit. So did that at Beyond Trust, did that recently at a company called Prevalent, and now I'm at Big ID doing that again, and as well as sprinkling in some inside sales team as well. So if I wasn't a glutton for enough punishment, I've taken 2 departments to build from the ground up.
That's awesome. Yeah. What's I love the track of you've done a lot of different roles. Mm-hmm. Do you think your time as kind of like an IC and even in tech support inevitably made you a better leader in the long run?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the tech side of things really kind of helped me with where I was going to have my career. I've been in technology, and when I come into companies like Big ID, that's a very niche part of cybersecurity. It helps understand what we're trying to sell. So obviously that helps with teaching the SDRs how to sell it. But having the different roles, it reminds you what it's like in the seat. So just like Taylor, said she was a BDR, worked her way up. And so we know what it's like to do the role. So as long as we remember that every day, it makes us better at understanding the people that we're working with and building out our processes and coaching and doing all those things with having that experience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm often jealous of some folks that have more technical chops than I do. I know at Outreach, there's a good friend of mine named Andrew Newborn, who's a solutions consultant. He's got really technical in the weeds, and then moved over as an AE. And now he's Superman, because he knows that the technical side so well. So that's really cool. Last but most definitely not least, joined by Ryan Gibson, Manager of Sales Development over at Outreach. Ryan, welcome, man.
Thanks, Scott.
Welcome.
Yeah, so
Florida. Hanging out in Florida right now?
Currently in Florida for one more day before heading back to Seattle.
Nice. And same question, man. What's the superhero origin story of Ryan Gibson?
Yeah, definitely. So it was definitely kind of a long journey getting to tech sales ultimately. I thought I wanted to go to law school after undergrad, took the LSAT a couple times, actually went to Michigan State for law school for a short period, realized that wasn't going to be the life for me. And I thought about what I had done in the past. And one thing that really stood out to me that I absolutely loved, and we've hired a lot of people from this organization, was selling women's shoes at Nordstrom. It was just such a fun, fast-paced experience. And then I started thinking about all my connections from undergrad at the University of Washington here in Seattle. They were all in tech sales. They were all loving life, killing it. So I just started reaching out to my network back in 2016 now. Landed an SDR gig at a super small startup where I was the 15th employee. Got to go through a Series A funding round, triple in growth, move up to a team lead in an AE role. Before transitioning over to a much larger public company in Smartsheet, where I was an AE for a little over a year. And then one of our corporate sales managers at Outreach, who I knew from college, convinced me to get a coffee with him one day, and the rest was history. So I spent my first 8 months at Outreach as an account executive, and then this opportunity to lead our SMB SDR team presented itself back in April, and have been in the role since then.
Awesome, man. Awesome. We're lucky to have you. And I think everyone at some point in their life should have some sort of either retail or hospitality experience. I think it does a good job at teaching grit, humility, and empathy in a really, really big way. What was the most do you remember the most expensive shoe that you ever sold at Nordstrom?
So it actually wasn't a shoe. I did sell a lady she bought like a $300 pair of shoes, but then she also wanted a $1,000 Valentino handbag. So I was a lucky one that got to help her out with that.
Nice. All right. Okay, let's dive into it. Quickly want to do some shout outs. We have a ton of people joining us. Shout out Gigi, Joa, Taylor, Rick, Axel, Gloria, Jennifer, Ken, Steve Bailey. What's up? He's from Vancouver. Danny. All right, we got a lot of folks. So remember, go ahead and use the chat. But if you have any questions you want the panelists to answer, do use the Q&A. But let's dive right into it. I think it's kind of going to build on the story. But let's start about how each of you actually got hired at the current unicorn you're at. Was it through networking? How did this kind of come to be? And then we'll break out. But I think it's important to set the stage. And we'll start with you, Taylor. How did you land this job at Salesforce?
Yeah, mine was a pretty traditional path. But I will preface, I never thought that I was going to work at Salesforce. I started in startups. And I love startups. I love the fast pace. I love kind of wear 25 different hats, even though you're in, an individual role. And I love the strategy in a startup. So I thought I was never going to leave startups. But at some point I thought, maybe I should just explore other options before I kind of keep myself in this one little box that is startups. And so I started exploring options, and Salesforce, of course, was one of them, being the top Canadian employer, or one of the anyway. And so I just had applied online, and kind of the traditional way, had a call, and I was very honest with the people I was interviewing with that I wasn't sure if big corporate was for me. And every person convinced me that it's not what it seems. And so I will say I'm very, very, very happy with the decision I made. And it really is a startup within a large corporation. So it's definitely been a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. What would you say the differences have been from, startup life to now, this part of this huge organization, even though you said it does feel like kind of a startup because you're leading the Canadian team? What are some of the differences?
I think the biggest thing is just like the direction. Like Mark Benioff, I'm sure everybody has heard him speak, is incredible and such an inspiring and motivational leader, and really aligns, the whole company really aligns everything that they do to, his overall objectives, and everybody can feel that. So, I may be 10 or 15 layers removed from that, but I still feel all of the same values and corporate goals as Mark Benioff does. And I think that that's really, really important. Mm-hmm. And so it helps us stay agile, but also aligned. Whereas in startups, I felt that, your vision could pivot every quarter. And as soon as you feel like you've picked up speed and you've, figured something out, it changes again. And so like that can be really defeating in startups, is like, you finally feel like you've got something, but maybe another part of the business doesn't have it. And so they pivot, and you're always kind of feel like you're trying to catch up, and you're trying to like run against a pace that maybe doesn't even make sense, or isn't even, as you feel, is impossible. And with Salesforce, we are still running at that pace, if not faster, but the direction you're running in, and everybody's aligned alongside of you. So that's probably been just like one of the biggest changes I've noticed, and definitely something that's been really great about being in a larger company.
Yeah, it's a great answer. That collective vision is so incredibly important, and the pivot after pivot after pivot in startups can get taxing for a while, for sure. Yeah. All right, I want to get Jason and Ryan your answers, but before I do that, I do want to just do a quick pulse check with the attendees, and I'm going to launch a quick poll before we get too deep into it. Just want to know what is your role, and that's going to help inform this discussion if we have more ICs or if we have more leadership. I'll leave that open for another 3, 2, one. Get those last votes in there. All right, we'll end it there. Okay, awesome. So we have 24% manager, another 20% director, 7% VP, and about 16% AE, and then 9% SDR. So primarily leadership focused audience. So we'll kind of speak through that lens. But Jason, how did you land this most recent role for some of those managers, directors joining us who are maybe want to take that next leap and maybe looking at, hypergrowth unicorn companies? How'd you get their attention?
Yeah, so I actually got recruited by Big ID, and I think what it really started with, I was one of those guys that honestly believed like creating a personal brand was kind of dumb, to be honest with you. I didn't really think it was a thing, but as I started seeing a lot of people in my network getting kind of the promotions and being steered towards the companies that I wanted to be steered to, I thought, hey, there's something to it. So, I joined Sales Hacker, Rev Genius. I tried to participate in that, updated my LinkedIn profile. I've kind of taken it back down a notch now, but I wanted to make myself real visible to people. So talked about a lot of my accomplishments, in LinkedIn. Again, I've taken that out now because I kind of go back into quiet mode where I'm happy where I'm at, but just made myself visible. And then Big ID came and, talked about the opportunity. And to be honest, it was a bit of a lateral move. I was doing the same thing at my previous role, building a SDR team and an inside sales team. But once I started doing some research on Big ID and seeing the funding rounds and how quickly they were growing and what people were saying about them in the media and everything, I was floored. I was like, yes, this is absolutely the opportunity for me because it's growing really, really, really fast, which will get me back into where I wanted to be, which was that fast expansion. So they recruited me. I had a bunch of conversations with obviously a lot of people there. I report directly to our CMO. So one thing I like about the startups that Taylor was talking about a little bit is I like that connection right to the executives, and had a lot of conversations with them, just talking about what I had accomplished in the past and really focused on honestly a lot of the mistakes I had made and what I'd learned over the last couple of journeys. And I think that's honestly what captivated them about me, was that willingness to be open and honest just about learning what I'd learned over the past couple of years and the failures I had had.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. And I think that's an important thing to note for all the kind of leaders that are joining us. Is it's unfortunately, it's not always enough just to smash your number anymore to get the recognition that you want. If you want the promotion and you want the big logos, there is an element of, call it personal branding, or just like creating community around yourself and like giving back and sharing the knowledge that you had. So that's awesome that you kind of leaned into that. And I'll know next time I see you really get into it that you're looking for the new.
Like I said, I'm in possum mode right now because I've got enough work stuff to do. But when you see that change, you'll know what's happening.
Yeah, awesome. Ryan, same question. So you mentioned you kind of got headhunted a little bit, right? Was it Kremer who took you for a coffee?
Oh yeah.
Nice, man. How did that go? Why do you think that was so you would chalk that up to like network effect, or how could people replicate kind of that story when you look at that?
Yeah, I think that's part of it for sure. For me, outreach, being in Seattle, had obviously been on my radar for quite a while. I had used it at my previous two companies. I knew the power behind it. So it was always kind of in the back of my head as a possibility of somewhere that I could end up. And like you said, Scott, Alex Kremer reached out to me. Him and I talked quite a bit and was like, what are you doing? Come be an AE over at Outreach. And I had no intention. I wasn't looking. I had no intentions of leaving. And just the energy that he had around Outreach in particular, it was so infectious, even just chatting with him over a coffee, that he convinced me to apply, and the rest was pretty much history from there.
Nice. Yeah. He's such an incredible leader. And I think the learning there, kind of like reading between the lines for those joining, is like, take the meetings, even if you're not looking, like take the meetings, take a few, I would suggest going through a full interview process like once a year. Keep yourself sharp, You get to network. You get to see what you're worth. You know, there's all sorts of things. So don't, even if you're super happy, don't get complacent. All right. True to what I said at the beginning, we've got some questions coming in. So let's just dive into them. We'll start with Rick's question. First one came in. When hiring sales talent, and Ryan, I'm going to go to you on this one first. We'll go opposite order. When hiring sales talent, what is your perception and willingness to utilize an external recruiter versus keeping it all in-house? Do you use recruiters, Ryan, today?
First off, great question. We have internal recruiters that handle this. We don't have external recruiters right now at Outreach. I think it's probably something that they are open to. We do have very lofty hiring goals this year in terms of what we need to hit to keep scaling at the rate that we are planning to and growing. But we have a team of fantastic internal recruiters that we use, and their calendars are jam-packed every single day with phone screens, gearing them up to send over to the hiring managers.
Nice. Jason, what are your thoughts on you like utilizing recruiters? You like to keep it in-house? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of, I'll use whatever gets me candidates as fast as I need them. And especially when you're hiring very, very quickly, you don't want to handcuff yourself to one thing. So yeah, we look at external recruiters. We have an internal recruiting team. I've also used some of those services that'll put together like a hiring day. This was obviously pre-COVID, where you could bring in 10, 15, 20 candidates and put them through some exercises. So we've used all of those things. I think it's really about, you know, it's not necessarily, do you want to use a recruiter? You got to make sure that you're using the right recruiter based on giving them a chance to throw you a couple candidates and see how you feel from there. That's big for me is really the results. Who's getting to me, and am I wasting my time with interviews that should have never really been in front of me at that point?
Yeah. Good point. Taylor, yay or nay with external recruiters?
Yeah, I mean, at Salesforce, we only use internal recruiters. So that's just a corporate decision. And I agree with Jason, though, when making the decision, it's, you know, how much time, when they get passed to me as a hiring manager, do I feel most of them are valuable conversations? Or, you know, what's the consistency of that? Because, you know, especially when you're managing a large team, there's nothing that is more frustrating than having a whole week of interviews that don't go well. There's nothing more frustrating. And so I guess personally, I'm indifferent, but also, you know, as a hiring manager myself, one thing I really lean on is the value of my network. So I actually made a post this morning, so this is very timely, that I'm hiring bilingual speaking BDRs to help cover the Montreal territory here in Canada. And so I tried to lean on my own network and try to get my team and other members within the organization to help bring that call out, because we've hired these people for a reason. And so their network is extremely valuable for that hiring process as well.
Nice. I like that. I might actually have a bilingual BDR for you. We'll take it off.
Let's chat. Yeah, please.
All right. I really like this question a lot. And Taylor, I'll go back to you on this one. Michael Scott. Michael, is that your real name? Because that's cool if that's your real name, like The Office. Have you ever hired too many too fast and had to retool or readjust your team? How do you manage the damage caused from having to be regressive in a few positions?
Good question. I would say most of the companies I've worked for, we've been more on the conservative side as far as hiring. However, I'm a big fan of capacity planning. So really trying to think, like, what does the next 3 months look like for me? What does the next 6 months look like for me? And what does 12 months look like for me? And I have a constant vision of that in my head at all times. Because again, as a hiring manager, there is nothing more frustrating than having a hole that you need to fill rather than having extra bodies in seat that you can move around. So it's definitely a fine balancing game on having too many, but also, you know, figuring out where the holes are. I have overhired before, and typically if I overhire, I always have a contingency plan in place before I do. So if I do overhire, let's say my team capacity is 10, I overhire 13. Before I extend that offer, I know what I'm going to do with that person. So whether it's, one of my territories is larger than the other, if I have a specific industry that needs more focus, when I was at previous companies, it was SDR, BDR kind of balancing sometimes that I could change coverage. So I definitely have overhired, but it involves planning still, I think, in advance.
Yeah. Capacity planning, so important. Having contingency plans, super important. I'll say I've seen almost as bad as it can get at one of the first tech companies I ever worked for, a fintech company, and they had went on a massive hiring spree, and then kind of retroactively figured out that the deal size didn't really warrant like the BDR function, and they had to slash like 3/4 of the BDRs in one day. And what that will do for morale, I don't think the company lasted much after that. So it's a super important thing to make sure that you're confident in these decisions and know what you're going to do if the worst case scenario happens. Jason, is this anything, have you had to deal with a situation like this before, and what was the outcome?
Yeah, unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but no, I haven't had too many too fast. I've usually been on the opposite side of trying to play catch up. And, as Taylor alluded to, having that capacity planning, I think, it's really important to stay in touch when you're talking about a sales development team. Stay in touch with the sales leaders and understand what their plans are, so you can tag team right behind it, versus, oh, we hired 3 new sales reps, and, now you're already a couple of months behind. So yeah, but just staying aligned with leadership and understanding where their hiring is going to go, so that you can keep track. That's the only time I've ever had that big problem of not enough is when communication fell down, or in the startups, in the unicorns, everybody's moving too fast and wearing 25 hats, like someone else said, and you forget those little things of, not what's right now, but what's happening in 3 months and 6 months from now.
Yeah. How do you keep those lines of communication open? It's harder now. We're all remote. Like you said, you've got your team and your KPIs and you're rocking. But sometimes it's hard to be like, okay, what's my marketing leader counterpart doing? What's my sales leader counterpart doing? How do you tactically keep those lines of communication open?
I honestly, overschedule one-on-ones with everybody throughout the company. So everyone that I need to talk to on a regular basis, or that I need to have that's going to touch what we do, I have one-on-ones. I'd rather have them too much and cancel them as we come up to them and give people time back in their day than not have that line of communication. And really the only time that we've had those fall downs is when something isn't scheduled, or we don't have time carved out to really talk about these things. So especially with, where I'm at right now, I've got one-on-ones with all our sales VPs, with our senior sales leadership, with our marketing leadership. And a lot of times we do, a half hour beforehand, like, hey, do you have anything for today? No, not really. Okay, we've got stuff to do. So you're not hurting anybody by giving them an hour or half hour back in their time. So it's overscheduling those one-on-ones to make sure that you are talking to people on a regular basis, and stuff will just come up organically in those conversations.
Nice. Yeah, good advice. Ryan, have you seen in your career where you had to, maybe hire too fast and you had to retool things a little bit?
Yeah, I think pretty similar to Jason. I've mostly been on the side of too few. Part of my role is specifically training newer SDRs to promote them up segment, ultimately getting them promoted to an AE role. And we're pretty lock in step with the AE team that we support. So we know how many we need for them to hit their pipeline number. So our scaling kind of goes hand in hand with that. In the past, I mentioned I'd been in a small startup, went through Series A funding, which was super exciting. And with that came some pretty quick growth. And we realized about 2 months into that we didn't necessarily need that many people. We hired about 5 additional AEs on the sales side and another 5 additional SDRs. And we just didn't have the market there yet. We weren't closing deals at a quick enough rate. So unfortunately, we ultimately had to let some people go. But that's really been the only experience that I've had with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In that experience, how did you think about kind of the after effect? How did you maintain culture in that experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think at that company, we were still so small at the time. I think at that point, we were at about 30 employees, and at least half of them have been there since year one. It was a very early age startup, so they had a good grasp on the culture. So obviously, it's always a shocker when you have to let people go like that, and it's going to hurt the morale. But I think we had a good foundation in place to really kind of build it back up once we were ready to kind of scale again and grow. And we did it a little bit slower the next time it came around.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, here's another great question. I like this one a lot. When do you decide to go get a top performer from outside your organization versus promote from your own internal team? The context is they have a 15-person team that all lacks enterprise experience and currently seeing market opportunities up market. Ryan, I'll go to you on this one. In this case, are you looking outside of someone who's, been an enterprise BDR? Are you going to try and teach someone to get there who's your top performer maybe? How do you look at that, and how do you balance the two?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think for us specifically at Outreach, we've seen the most success come from promoting within. And I think this holds true for a lot of organizations. At Outreach in particular, you learn the product inside and out, using it every single day as an SDR. Like our SDRs, half the time they know the product better than the AEs that are out there closing deals, right? So they have that hands-on experience. Like you can teach someone how to talk to companies with 5,000 people, 10,000 people. You can learn that business acumen as long as you have the product knowledge base behind it as well. So if you ask those strong questions, if you can talk, we call it talking above the line to sales leaders that you want to get in touch with, I think that motion can be trained. And we've seen much more success from promoting within. When we go outside of Outreach for those enterprise or corporate level positions, we are looking for someone typically that has experience using Outreach or selling to the enterprise or corporate level.
Yeah, that's a great thing about having a product that the team uses every day. If there's a way, like even if you're not in sales or MarTech or anything, if there's a way you can somehow infuse your technology product service into your team's day to day, it's so incredibly helpful for them to progress. Jason, same question. When do you look for bringing on some outside talent? When do you hire from within?
I think the main thing you have to think about is how much time are you willing to invest, or how much time do you have to invest? So to bring a SDR up to enterprise level sales is going to take a lot of time. And like Ryan said, you can teach it, but it's going to take a lot of effort to teach it. You're going to have to ride along on a lot of opportunities, and you're going to have to be willing to kind of sacrifice some time while they get their chops up to speed. So if it's something where you're looking to grow, organically like that, and you're willing to put in the time, or you have the time to do it, then absolutely go internally. In my industry, when we look to expand, especially enterprise, we're talking to C-levels with a ton of experience and also very, very technical. So we generally have to go outside for that, to find somebody who's been in our market or an adjacent market. They know how to talk the talk, and they've done these deals with the big companies whose names you recognize. So we don't get to promote from within, from SDR to enterprise. We can't have that step. One of the reasons we're building the inside sales team is to get that bench. So we get people closing deals with that mid-market and get them talking that talk, so then we can start promoting to enterprise from there. So again, when to decide, it's really based on what kind of time you have and what kind of patience you have for that learning curve, because there's going to be a pretty steep learning curve.
Yeah, it's a great point. If you're at you've got 14 reps you're managing, you're at max capacity, how much time are you going to be able to teach this person? Are you setting them up for success? Good things.
Especially with the enterprise sale. I mean, I've been in inside sales my whole career, for 20 some years. I'm dating myself, but if you asked me to go sit in front of a C-level executives at Microsoft, I'd walk in there, sweating through my suit. I'd have no idea what to do. So there's going to be a learning curve to teach anyone to do that, but especially when you're looking at inside sales reps or SDRs that have very little experience, there's even bigger curve there to worry about.
Yeah, for sure. Taylor, do you look at it the same way? What's the track at Salesforce? Typically outside or internal hires?
Yeah, so we try to keep a balance always within the company. I think part of that is for equality purposes, as well as to make sure that we're constantly bringing new, fresh ideas into the business. So we typically do balance just to make sure that we're always growing as a company and not continually just promoting within. But in this scenario, I think it just depends. Like for me, my hiring criteria is the same. So putting my AE management hat back on, if that's the role that I was hiring for. It really, whatever however I would interview internally and externally would be the same. So of course I would personally choose to favor internally. We try to promote internally as much as we can if those people are ready, but we don't have a bias against external either if that person is potentially a better suited candidate and we don't have somebody who's ready within the organization. So it's definitely a mix and a balance, but I think you can't sacrifice whatever your hiring criteria is to just for the sake of promoting internal. As much as we want to promote internal, I think that's great. And I think it's great to promote your people, but you don't want to sacrifice, and to Jason's point, have to put a lot more energy and also to set them up for failure too, because that's not fair to anybody, particularly to the candidate actually. So.
Yeah. I like that. You brought up something interesting about, you mentioned equality, which I think is a super important thing. And I'm going to ask a tough question. I'm going to put the three of you on the spot. It's a tough one and something that the tech industry needs to figure out. How do you balance when, you all kind of stated you need people, right? You're hiring so fast, you're growing so fast. How do you balance the need for getting top tier talent fast and balancing diversity and inclusion initiatives? We have a problem in tech. We need more people of color. We need more females. We need more of a ton of underrepresented groups in tech. Taylor, how do you look at that when I have to make 5 hires this month, and maybe you don't have a steady candidate pool of maybe underrepresented groups?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge that we face, and something we're actively working towards. Equality is one of our values at Salesforce, and has been long before, let's say, the last 12 months where this has really been elevated. So it's definitely something top of mind for our organization always. For me, I am that minority. So I think that helps give me a perspective when I hire, in that I want to help, ensure that there is diversity across my team, and to give equal opportunities. And so it's definitely a challenge. I think we really rely heavily on our recruiters to bring us as many people from different backgrounds. And I love hiring people with unique backgrounds. One thing that I really look for in my interviews when I ask questions is not necessarily their experience, but also what have they learned from life? And that I love asking a lot of situational questions about how opinions have changed for them over the past 5 years, what things they've learned over the past 5 years. And it's not necessarily about if they have software experience or if they have direct selling experience in Canada, or whatever the questions might be that are maybe more typical. I want to know how they think, and are they coachable? And if they have those qualities, I think that helps increase sometimes the amount of candidates and the types of candidates that we get, because it's not quite the traditional type of hire, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes complete sense. I like the way of looking at it. Jason, how do you look at this?
Yeah, I think very similarly to what Taylor said, and I like, recruiters hate me because they always say, okay, what kind of candidate are you looking for? And I say, I'm looking for the diamonds in the rough. Now go find that person on paper. It's really tough to do, but it's an organizational thing. So first of all, you have to have a recruiting team that is putting diverse candidates in front of you. And then it is relying on experience. So being the person that gives them that opportunity to move into an industry that maybe they, they wouldn't have before. Some of my best hires had 0 sales experience and 0 tech experience, but they had that grit, they had that get after it that you're looking for. And they also happen to be minority candidates. And I think that's a societal thing. I don't want to get too controversial with it, but you get a lot of that from people who have been unfortunately disadvantaged throughout. So looking beyond, what school did you go to? What did you graduate with your degree in? What's your experience like? What does your life look like? Who are you as a person? And if you look at that, you'll organically get a team that is diverse because you're not looking at the classic candidate. You're looking at the person and where they've come from and what they've overcome to get to where they are.
Well said. Well said. Ryan, I know it's super important at Outreach. How do you balance the massive growth with slowing down sometimes to make sure we get diverse candidates in?
Yeah, first off, I want to give a shout out to Danny in the chat. I think she had a great comment in there that you have to commit to sourcing a diverse candidate pool, not only at the role and team level, but at the company level. And I think that's part of the reason why we've seen success in that. Outreach in particular, our CEO is a minority leader, and Scott, you know this very well. Manny he is so passionate about everything that he does, and that is one of them: diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it really does come from the top down. And we'd have a lot of programs in place, whether it's Women in Sales, our Gals and Sals network. We have a few different minority groups at Outreach that are focused on working with HBCUs specifically for recent college grads. And similar to what Taylor said, I love the situational interview questions. I think experience can be so much more important than just, hey, I hit 120% every single quarter. Like, numbers are great. Obviously, you want to hire those top performers, but I want to know about a time that you failed and you were able to bounce back from it, or what were you able to learn from that scenario? Because working in tech is so fast paced and things are going to change so fast, specifically at a unicorn company, that if you can't learn from those mistakes, you're probably not going to be a good fit. So I try to feel a lot of that out in the interview process.
Yeah. I like it. Looks like we're all on the same page. And Danny has another great comment: skills over experience. If they have the skill set to do the job, but they didn't have the direct experience, that's all good. Okay. Lots of great questions, true to form. I'm just going to keep them rolling. You guys are guiding this. Great questions. Thank you, everyone, for being so engaged with this whole thing. Okay. Where's a good one? Ooh, this is a good one. What's your process? And Taylor, I'm going to go to you on this one. What's your process for ramping up sales reps? How quick do you expect them to be hitting quota? What's the ramp period? I imagine it's very different onboarding now that we're all remote. I think you said earlier this week that you've only met your team like once the whole time, which is crazy. So how are you thinking about onboarding these days, and when are they expected to be at full capacity?
Yeah. So for everybody who maybe hadn't heard, I onboarded at Salesforce remotely. So I have been with the company since May. I am the example of now how I try to teach and train my new hires. About 50% of my team now has onboarded remotely. So it's been an interesting transition. Yeah. So our team for BDRs, they're expected to be ramped after 2 months. Fully after 3, but pretty much after the first 60 days on the phones. They have 30 days before that where they are just like learning. So Salesforce itself has a lot of boot camps and onboarding that is run by, overall corporate enablement. And then we have team specific enablements and trainings that we run for those folks for about a week or 2 as well. But really, like, that stuff's great, and it's great to give the Salesforce feel, the Salesforce story, and the Salesforce way. But it doesn't necessarily mean it gives, the team way. And I think, like, because, as I mentioned, we're like a startup within Salesforce, so every team is unique. The way that I train and develop and mentor my team is not the same as any manager, even within my direct business unit. So the best way for me to make sure that my reps are ramping as quick as possible is first we align them one-to-one with somebody on my team as their trail guide for the first 30 to 60 days, and that's their mentor that their mentor is expected to make sure that they're ramping and answer all their questions. And I've started really delegating things to my team members that I know they're really strong in. So for example, if one of my team members is really strong in social selling, then I will make sure that they're aligned to that new hire to teach them, everything they know about social selling and do shadow sessions. Somebody's really strong on the phones, I will align them to listen to call shadow sessions with that person. Somebody's really good at analyzing data in Salesforce, and Salesforce, as everybody knows, is a beast of a solution and can be very overwhelming if you've never used it. So I want to give my reps the best chance of being successful with the tools that we have. So I just align them one-to-one with my reps, and that's proven to be really successful. All my new hires so far have hit, I think, 100% or more of their quota in their first 30 days on the phone, and they're not expected to do that till the first 90. So it's worked really well.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah.
I like the mentor program, kind of like buddy system. Super important to have that person who's like not your leader, your manager, that you can ask the quote unquote like dumb questions that you're like scared to ask is so important. And I like this idea of highlighting people that have strengths on your team and getting them to present to them or teach them. Those are two great great ideas. Jason, how are you looking at ramping new reps in this strange time we all find ourselves in?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I got lucky because I was training and ramping reps remotely across the world before COVID hit. So I kind of wasn't surprised at, oh, now I have to do it all remote. We had done it before. I think when you're ramping people now, right, that everyone's remote, and Taylor's got one meeting up on me. I haven't met anyone on my team yet, and I onboarded remotely. So there's no face-to-face here. It's really important to create that community like Taylor was talking about. So I have reps on the team that I've identified do certain things well, and they'll be part of the onboarding and part of the training process. And that helps to, like you said, right, they can go ask questions of someone who's not their leader, who's not their manager, and maybe sometimes it's not even the sales rep they're aligned to. If it's an SDR or the field rep that the inside sales is aligned to, you sometimes don't want to ask them the things. So yeah, it's all about creating that community throughout the training process, and that ramps so much quicker, right? We have the same thing as Taylor. It's 90 days technically. Most people are there. We expect them to kind of be there by 60 days, and most everybody's actually there by 30 days, just because of the focus that we have on getting multiple inputs and taking the experiences of everybody and putting that all into that one person to help them get up as quickly as possible. A lot of shadow sessions, and then using tools like Gong or ExecVision, or, I don't want to pick out one, but a call coaching thing where you can share those best practices and those previous experiences, and asking for input on the team. So we put together an objection document to have everybody pour in. So when you bring in a new hire, you can say, here's the real world objections that you're going to get, right? Not what product marketing is telling you, and not what your manager, me, is telling you what you might hear. Here's what you actually hear, and here's what people have actually said that has worked, and so on and so forth. So it's all about that, all about creating that team atmosphere and the village to raise the child.
Yeah, I like that. I'm often jealous of new BDRs who have like the Gongs, Chorus, ExecVisions of the world. Wasn't around when I was a BDR, but would have been extremely helpful. So if you're a BDR and you're on this and you're not just diving into that like every day, go do it.
I might date myself, but my group training was the guy who sat next to me was pretty good, and I got to listen to him as working off my spreadsheet. There's nothing like this that we have now. So yeah, I would try to get the team to really buy into those tools and use those tools to ramp faster, and don't reinvent the wheel. It's already there. Just kind of copy what we've got already.
Yeah. Please explain what you just said about gongs and bells. Sorry, Jennifer. So Gong and Chorus and Exec Vision are actually they're conversational intelligence tools. They're a SaaS platform that records all your sales calls and looks for different themes and different trends that are going on. So definitely, Jennifer, check them out. Ryan, I know there's some interesting things Outreach does when it comes to onboarding. Break it down.
Yeah, so I think Taylor and Jason have hit a lot of it on the head as far as like ramping speed and things like that go. Ours is right around 90 days as well. But I actually stepped into a phenomenal position at Outreach in this position specifically. We have what we call an Agoji SDR manager that is solely responsible for the onboarding of new SDRs. So they are responsible for their learning, for their success, for essentially those first 3 months. So they take them through a week-long boot camp, and then they're responsible for those first 3 ramping months where they're ramping up to that full quota. So quite honestly, I lucked out stepping into a great position. We have a fantastic team lead named Mark Mashofsky who does this. So that way, when they are ready to come to my team, I'm obviously still coaching them. And I think one of the unique things that Mark does really well with this program is he brings in people from all over the business to run coaching sessions with our team. I think, as all of you know on the panel and probably everyone who's attending, being in Zoom meetings all day is super tiring. I know my team is tired of looking at my face and hearing me talk every single day. I'm tired of listening to myself talk every single day. So the more people you can bring in from other business units, other teams that have unique experiences, that's going to help keep your team engaged so much more. It's going to help keep them interested out of the gate, especially in those first couple of months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great stuff there. I think the Agoji leader is one of my favorite things that our business development function does. There's a lot of incredible things, but that's a really cool thing that I think a lot of companies are going to model in the future, having a dedicated person just to onboarding, because as the three of you know, there's like so much you have to think about as a manager. It might be like end of quarter, they're starting, you're like, oh, I really want to give you my attention, but also I got to hit my number. I think it's a really cool thing. All right, I'm going to keep this question intentionally vague, and then we'll do rapid fire to get through the rest of the questions. But we had a lot of manager, director level folks here. I imagine many are maybe new to this role. Ryan, if you could go and jump in a time machine and take you back to the first day where you started your leadership position, what, let's say, 2 things would you tell Ryan Gibson, who's just getting into leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question, because this was my first formal kind of managerial experience. I had some in the past where it was a little bit of a hybrid model, but I think for me, looking back, and I did transition into this position remotely, kind of similar to Taylor. I think for me, one thing that I would have done differently, I did this a lot later on. I actually did this back in November, but I would have seeked out approval to basically do the SDR job at Outreach specifically for 2 weeks, a week maybe, just to really kind of reground myself. Obviously I'd done the SDR role 2-3 years prior. I know what it takes. I know it's an absolute grind, but there are different nuances everywhere. It's different talking to sales leaders versus when I was talking to public health directors back in the day. There are a lot of different things that you need to be able to pick up on. You need to be able to pivot during conversations and ultimately just learn that day-to-day process. I think it's just so unique everywhere. The SDR position sometimes gets overlooked and we forget how hard it is. Being in sales, you typically don't, because they're the ones driving pipeline for the whole organization. But I think I would have just taken a step back and just done the position for a week, just to remind myself once again how hard it is to get said no to, 90 to 100 times a day.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic answer, and a very, I guess, humble answer. I think that would be a great best practice. I mean, if you jump to a new org, just because you've done a BDR role at another org doesn't mean it's the same direct crossover. why not jump in, get your hands dirty for a couple weeks, you know, remind yourself. I think that should be a new best practice. Let's make that one. All new leaders got to jump in the trenches for 2 weeks. Jason, same question to you. I got a time machine. I drop you off the day that you got your first leadership position. What would you tell yourself?
Yeah, there's two things. One would be that you can't do it for them. I think a lot of new sales managers fall into the trap of, oh, there's a problem. Okay, let me fix it because I know how to fix it right away, versus having the patience to teach. So it's, you know, you feed a man for a day or you teach him how to fish. You got to remember to teach him how to fish. And then I think the second thing for me, you know, I was a little younger when I got my first one and maybe got a little bit arrogant or cocky, but it's don't forget who you truly serve, right? I report to our CMO, but I serve my SDR and my inside sales team. My job is to make their job easier because I can't book the meetings and opportunities. I can't close all the deals. I can't do all the work that they do. And that's how I get paid. So you have to remember, you know, who's buttering your bread and who do you truly serve? Those would be the two things that I think got in the way or even slowed me down a little bit as I was growing through management. Those were the big hurdles at the beginning.
I like it. Can't do it for them. Don't forget who you serve. Like that should be on my office wall, I think. I like it. Taylor, same question to you.
Yeah, for me, it is resist as hard as you possibly can, not to change everything that you see that you want to fix immediately. I started in leadership about two and a half years ago. And the biggest mistake I made when I first went in was I saw all the challenges. My senior leaders had told me what the challenges were, and I came up with solutions immediately and wanted to implement them. And my team didn't like me very much when I did it. And it was my first time managing. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible manager. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So that was at my last company. And, you know, eventually gained back the trust and, you know, tried to explain why. I'm a big believer of, you know, Simon Sinek's book about telling why before you do anything. And so that was a big learning curve for me. So I know, Scott, I think I mentioned this even on Tuesday, so this is a little repetitive for you, but I'm a big believer of crowdsourcing from my team. So before I make any change or implement anything, I crowdsource. So that comes right down to my team vision, where my team helped me write the team vision. It's not me telling them what our vision is, it's them helping me write that vision. And so they're all bought into that vision, and it's not me having to push it upon them. Same for, like, I think it was day 2 of my new role here. I sent a survey out and I said, it's going to seem weird, I'm asking you all these questions, but I want to know, like, what do you want to learn? What do you want to change? What do you think is your biggest strength? And I really tried to crowdsource that information. So then I can create sessions where they're teaching each other. And I can also help them in areas where they actually want to be helped. So not me coming in and just trying to change the world, but actually lean into what they're looking for. So also to Jason's point, like, we serve our team. So I try to do that when I come in and yeah, so don't try to change everything all at once. You got to resist, but it's tough.
It is tough. It certainly is. And how do you tactically do that? I think you mentioned Google Forms. So you're sending out like kind of bi-weekly Google Forms to get a pulse check on the team and what they're trying to accomplish and learn. Is that how you do it?
Yeah, quarterly I send Google Forms. Any new initiative we try, I send one after for quick feedback. Anytime I just want an opinion, sometimes like spiffs, like, hey, what spiff is going to excite you next week? Instead of us just trying to come up with everything, like, let's hear it from our own individuals. So like, what's going to motivate them and excite them? And then if I identify a challenge that I think is a challenge, I sometimes, will ask like leading questions to try to get them to also self-identify, but I want them to be able to still identify it before I come up with, a big solution to maybe a problem that they don't see themselves. So yeah, it kind of depends.
I like it. All right. These hours always fly by. Ryan, Jason, Taylor, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wealth of knowledge with the Sales Hacker community. Really appreciate the three of you. And for all of those who hung out with us, thank you so much. I can't remember the last time we got so many questions. We didn't get through to them all. But I imagine if people want to continue this conversation, what's the best way to connect with the three of you? Are you LinkedIn? Are you Twitter? Clubhouse now? There's all sorts of things. Taylor, what's your best way for people to kind of connect with you and keep learning from you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best way. I'm pretty active on there. So
awesome. And Jason?
Yep, same thing. LinkedIn. I get them all day, every day, the notifications. So
sounds good. And Ryan, LinkedIn?
Yep, same thing. I just threw it in the chat again for everyone.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us. Have a fantastic end to your month. I hope you all crush it. Thanks again, panelists, and I'll see you all soon.
thanks so much.
Thanks, Scott.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.